Elias sat in the amber glow of his basement archive, surrounded by the silent ghosts of a 40-year career. Each shelf was a cemetery of film canisters holding the heartbeats of a world he had watched through a lens. As a retired news cameraman, he had seen empires fall, but his own life was now a quiet loop of cataloging the past. His stiff fingers traced the labels of tapes he hadn't touched in decades. He wasn't merely organizing a library. He was hunting for a shadow. He was searching for the one that got away, a piece of footage he believed held the truth about the tragedy that had shattered his family and left him alone in this house of memories. He slid a tape into the player, the mechanical whir echoing in the cramped room. The screen flickered with an impossible rescue. In a shaky shot, a mother stood over a crushed car. With a primal scream, she exerted a strength that defied physics, lifting the vehicle to free her child. Elias remembered the heat of that day and how his hands had trembled. He reflected on the adrenaline of love, a raw force that turned ordinary people into legends. It was a beautiful testament to the human spirit, yet it only reminded him of the things he had failed to protect. He had captured the miracle, but he hadn't been the one to perform it. The lens was his boundary. The footage shifted to nature's wrath. He saw the wall of a tsunami swallowing a town and the black finger of a tornado shredding houses like tissue paper. These moments emphasized the absolute fragility of life. As he watched, the old fear returned, the fear of being a mere observer. He had spent his life behind a tripod while others suffered. His existence reduced to frames and focus pulls, while reality unraveled on the other side of the glass. The camera was a barrier, a wall that kept him safe while the rest of the world was torn apart by the elements. His life was a collection of catastrophes captured for a public that forgot them by morning. This fed into the cameraman's curse, the crushing weight of guilt from choosing to record a disaster rather than intervening. He had wrestled with this morality for decades, wondering if his camera was a shield or just an excuse for inaction. He felt like a vulture of history, feeding on misfortune to craft a compelling news segment. This guilt was a constant companion, a ghost living in the static between the images he produced for the world. To record is to be a witness, but to be a witness is often to be a bystander when a hero was needed. He lived with that silence every night. To balance the darkness, he replayed a grainy clip of a weary soldier sharing bread with an enemy in the ruins of a bakery. It was the gift of bread, a moment of unexpected humanity proving that even in hatred, kindness could bloom. It was one of the few pieces of footage that gave Elias hope, reminding him that the world wasn't entirely made of tragedy. The silence of the footage made the gesture feel even more sacred and deeply human, a brief flicker of light in a career defined by shadows. His hand moved to a dusty crate, his fingers brushing an unlabeled VHS tape. He pulled it out, his heart hammering. He wiped away the grime to reveal a date in Julian's hurried handwriting, the day his brother disappeared. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Elias stared at the tape, his breath hitching as he realized the mystery he had spent half his life avoiding was finally within his reach, contained in the black plastic of a forgotten memory. The room seemed to shrink around him as he contemplated the truth hidden inside the darkness of the film, wondering if he was truly ready to see what Julian had left behind. Elias's hand hovered over the play button, his pulse thrumming. He needed to steady his breathing before diving into Julian's final day. To stall, he reached for a reel labeled Urban Miracles. The screen flickered with strangers preventing tragedies in bustling cities. He watched as a man lunged to grab a toddler from the edge of a subway platform, just as the train's whistle shrieked. In another, a woman sprinted into traffic to pull a confused man from a speeding truck. These moments of uncalculated heroism moved the narrative from tragedy to hope. Even in concrete jungles, the instinct to protect life remained strong. As he watched, Elias thought of how different he was from his brother. Julian had been a photographer driven by the allure of fame rather than the pursuit of truth. While Elias was content to be a shadow in the background, Julian wanted to be the story itself. He chased dangerous assignments because he craved the prestige of the front page. Julian viewed the lens as a ladder, whereas Elias saw it as a window. This difference had created a rift between them, a tension Elias carried as resentment for years. He had always seen Julian's disappearance as a final act of reckless ambition that had abandoned their family to unanswered questions. The archive then coughed up a darker moment, a security clip of a high-stakes heist. In the footage, a pair of thieves worked with surgical precision until sirens wailed. Without hesitation, the getaway driver sped away, leaving his partner standing alone in the rain, staring at the retreating taillights with a look of pure betrayal. Elias felt a sharp pang of recognition. He saw his own life in that abandoned man, the one who stayed behind while the world moved on. It was a visual echo of being discarded by the people who were supposed to stand by him. To cleanse his mind, he fast-forwarded to animal instincts. He watched a dog pulling a kitten from a gutter and an elephant shielding her calf from a lion. These moments of protection served as a foil to human selfishness. Animals did not act for a legacy. They acted because life recognized life. It was a purer form of existence that Elias often turned to when human malice became too heavy. The simple empathy displayed on the screen was a soothing balm, reminding him that the world still held a fundamental goodness. Finally, Elias ejected the reel and slid the unlabeled VHS tape into the machine. The mechanism groaned, ancient plastic grinding against metal. The footage was raw and handheld, lacking any professional stability. The camera peered through a fence into a rain-slicked alleyway, where two silhouettes were locked in a heated argument. Elias leaned forward, his nose nearly touching the glass. He recognized the leather jacket Julian had worn that final winter. The other man was tall, dressed in an expensive overcoat that looked out of place in the grime. Suddenly, the sky on the tape split open. It was a bizarre, breathtaking clip Julian had apparently recorded over. A sunset wedding where a massive meteor streaked across the violet background, a burning green spear illuminating the shocked, beautiful faces of the guests. It symbolized a world moving forward despite personal heartbreak. But the tape cut back to the alley and the audio crackled to life with a chilling clarity. Elias's blood turned to ice. He recognized the voice threatening his brother. It was the corrupt official, the cold, powerful man Elias had served loyally for over a decade. Julian wasn't a random victim. He had filmed something dark he shouldn't have seen, and the person threatening him was Elias's own boss, the man who had controlled his entire career for 40 years, keeping him blind to the truth that was buried beneath the weight of these long, silent, grainy, and forgotten analog tapes. The screen flickered, the static momentarily replaced by the sharp clarity of another archival reel. Elias processed the betrayal of his former employer by watching a sequence of clips showing the height of achievement. He watched astronauts floating in the silent void of space, their suits stark against the eternal blackness, looking back at Earth with a gaze that sought answers to ancient questions. Then, the scene shifted to deep-sea divers descending into the crushing abyss, their lanterns cutting through a darkness that had never known light. These explorers represented the relentless human search for truth in the dark, a drive that Elias realized had also defined his brother's final hours. Whether in the vacuum of space or the depths of the ocean, the camera was the only thing that could bridge the gap between the unknown and the understood. Elias returned his focus to the unlabeled VHS. The argument in the rain-slicked alley grew more intense, the water drumming a frantic rhythm against the microphone. The corrupt official stepped closer to Julian, his face obscured by a black umbrella, but his voice was unmistakable, cold, calculating, and dripping with arrogance. He offered Julian a simple, brutal choice: destroy the film of the crime he had witnessed or perish in the filth. Elias watched with a lump in his throat, his hands trembling. He had spent years expecting to see the brother he remembered, the one who chased fame, falter. But Julian stood his ground, the camera shaking in his grip, not from fear, but from the weight of the moral truth he held. Then came the 19th unbelievable shot. It was the moment that shattered 40 years of Elias's resentment. On the screen, Julian didn't run. Instead, he took advantage of a momentary distraction as a siren wailed. With a swift, practiced motion, he tucked the camera into a rusted trash bin near a distinctive stone archway. Before pulling his hands away, Julian turned his head slowly and looked directly into the lens. He didn't look like a victim. He looked like a man who was winning. He smiled, a small knowing grin, and whispered a name that the microphone barely caught. Elias. In that instant, Elias understood. Julian wasn't filming for the front page. He was filming for his brother. The 20th and final moment caught on camera was the most personal. As the corrupt official grabbed Julian used his free hand to point toward the base of a gnarled oak tree visible at the end of the alley. It was a silent signal, a map for the only person who spent his life analyzing every frame. Elias knew that spot. It was a forgotten park near the old studio where they had played as children under the summer sun. The tape hissed into white noise, the signal lost, but the message had been delivered. Julian hadn't abandoned his family. He had entrusted Elias with the most important assignment of their lives. Sitting in the silence, Elias realized his cameraman's curse was never a burden of inaction. His 40 years of witnessing the world had been a training session for this night. He wasn't just a bystander. He was the vault. His career wasn't a waste. He was the only one who could bring the truth to light. The guilt finally lifted, replaced by a cold sense of purpose. With steady movements, he began digitizing the evidence and uploading it to every news outlet. He felt a profound peace as the progress bar reached 100%. He stood up and walked to his camera. He simply closed the lens cap, the click echoing like a final period. On a nearby monitor, a breaking report surfaced. An anchor spoke of a massive scandal involving a prominent official, citing anonymous evidence. Images of the gnarled oak tree and unearthed documents flickered across the screen, proving that some moments caught on camera don't just record history, they rewrite it. Elias turned off the lights, leaving the ghosts of his career to finally rest in